I'm often asked about wisdom. Define wisdom. Wisdom is not about how much we know, but actually realizing how little we know. And here is a very wise man who famously said, "One thing I have learned in a long life, that all our science measured against reality is actually primitive and childlike. We still do not know 1,000th of 1% of what nature has revealed to us." Humankind today is at a dangerous inflection point in its short history on this planet. Our unsustainable use of land and sea is causing the decline and degradation of natural ecosystems at an alarming scale. Did you know that of every 3 breaths you take, 2 of them are actually produced by our oceans? Floods, droughts, hurricanes, forest fires, landslides, one could go on and on. These natural disasters are now happening at a scale never seen before. Talking about COVID-19, which is a zoonotic disease, this threatens economic development, ecosystem integrity. And this pandemic reflects our connectedness to one another, how pathogens jump from animals to humans when humans take over their habitat, and how actions and events in one part of the world affects us all. These connections make up the fabric of nature. Weakening or removing one form of life impacts the entire biodiverse ecosystem, making species vulnerable to extinction and natural systems less resilient. People often talk about carbon concentration, which is actually the common measure of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It is now at a record level of 420 parts per million. The last time we were at these levels was 3 billion years ago. Let me put this in context. The Earth's ecosystems are collapsing. We are losing all things that we love: family, people, places, things, our heritage, everything we care about and hold closer to our hearts. Talking about home, India now ranks first among global flood hotspots, followed only by China and the USA. In 2019 alone, the country registered 16 extreme flood events, which affected almost 150 districts. Let's talk about air pollution. It is one of the largest causes of mortality globally, and more so in India. 1.7 million premature deaths were reported from air pollution, and 21 of the world's worst polluted 30 cities are located here. And if you live in North India, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is not just a public health crisis of epic proportions. It's a double whammy. A recent Dalberg Advisors report outlines how this puts a tremendous burden on the Indian economy as well. It causes losses of $95 billion every year. That's not small change, and that's equivalent to 3% of India's GDP. It is not surprising then that we are ranked 5th in the Global Risk Index. Think about this: a 7,200 kilometer coastline, ever exposed to rising sea levels and storm surges, high share of polluting fossil fuels in our energy system, dropping water tables, depleting soil organic carbon to alarming levels, and the high dependence of rural livelihoods on agriculture makes us one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. Is everything lost? No, there is hope. Our strength lies in executing large-scale policies and initiatives that deliver the greatest number of benefits in terms of livelihoods and affordable energy access. Think about the Ujjwala program, which has now empowered 100 million families who have switched to LPG as their domestic cooking fuel. Talking about social benefits, imagine all the women that had to go around for miles and miles to fetch forest and non-forest timber products for their daily cooking needs. With the Green Revolution, India achieved food security, but its long-term impacts of using high-input synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides are now visible. Indian agriculture is broken. The overuse of pesticides and fertilizers have devastated soil and water resources. Look around. Think of Punjab, where you have to go down to 300 and 400 feet to fetch water for agriculture. Increasing farmer debt and the public health crisis is now at unbearable proportions. From producers, especially smallholder farmers, through to consumers, Indian agriculture is no longer fit for purpose. But a new agricultural revolution is possible by harnessing the power of nature and the power of modern integrative system science. We know that agroecological approaches, which is working with instead of against nature, have proven to be more resilient, more cost efficient, and more effective, and above all, more sustainable. While there are millions of farmers in India who are now practicing one form of natural farming or the other, their challenge is to properly frame, explain, and advocate for their innovations. Otherwise, they are dismissed as heretics. These benefits are multidimensional and they create prosperity where it matters the most, at the bottom of the pyramid. Nothing makes this point as emphatically as the dramatic improvements in the public health situation in these 93 biovillages in the state of Andhra Pradesh. If we do this right, India could actually become the hub of entrepreneurial excellence in sustainable agriculture, much in the same way Silicon Valley is driving the fourth industrial revolution. And this is not hyperbole. Let me focus on the facts. First, we need adequately trained and capable professionals. Universities and training institutions should turn out nature-first graduates rather than input-first, as is the situation now. Second, institutions that research into restorative and regenerative agriculture based on evidence from research and lived experiences need to be encouraged and empowered, not denounced. Third, financing sustainable development in India requires the government to foster an enabling business environment in which investments that enable a green economy transition are competitive compared to conventional ones. People often say, in a lighter vein, that governments work best when they get out of the way. It couldn't be much truer than in this context. Fourth, it requires corporations to identify and commit to out-of-the-box business models and cutting-edge research to find solutions that are as unique as India's challenges. And lastly, we need the resources to simultaneously retool agriculture and practitioners to apply principles of agroecology, natural farming, and agroforestry for a reimagined agriculture and a reinvented India. You might say, great idea, but for ideas to work, someone needs to do the work. And someone needs to invest billions of dollars in these ideas. Interestingly, investing in the protection of landscapes is not a choice governed by caution or even benevolence, but one that makes economic sense, exemplifying the search to create genuine rather than false value, and to pursue innovative ways to finance India's sustainable development. If you look at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change numbers, they posit that we would need about $2.5 trillion in investments over a period of 15 years, that is 2016 to 2030. But a study by Climate Policy Institute finds that India is actually able to garner around 10% of the annual requirement in excess of the $200 billion that it needs every year. Hence, we need to mobilize capital to attain our NDC targets. Now, financing sustainable development in India, like in any other country, means investing in the future. That's all good. How do we square the circle? Climate finance could be a very powerful tool for increasing green investment. This is actually an area where some of the most innovative and potentially transformative solutions for broader sustainability issues are emerging. We need a virtuous partnership of governments and the financial sector, with development partners and research institutions playing an important facilitating role. There's overwhelming evidence now from across India that it costs just about 15,000 rupees or 200 US dollars for smallholder farmer to help them transition from synthetic chemical agriculture to natural farming. And this you do by capacity building, hand holding, building community resources, and the like. By this measure, transitioning the 120 million smallholder farmers in India would need about 24 billion US dollars, but that will produce exponential gains in grassroots prosperity as well as ecosystem and public health. Here is an idea. We could actually get this done for free. Let me explain. Last year, the government of India spent $17 billion towards agricultural subsidies in fertilizers, farm credits, crop insurance, and minimum support prices. The fertilizer subsidy alone cost the national exchequer more than $13 billion a year. And then the state governments granted another $16 billion in subsidies towards electricity, irrigation, and crop insurances. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room: farm loan waivers that come with every political cycle. The farmers demand it because the conventional model of high input, low output agriculture simply doesn't work. Now, if you account for cost inflation, these subsidies will likely reach $50 billion by 2030, really unsustainable levels. But if we repurpose this subsidy to support India's transition to a sustainable future, that will help generate system scale impact in a cost-neutral manner. We can actually have our cake and eat it too. Now, this scale of transition will offer tremendous confidence and opportunity for the private investors, development finance institutions, pension and insurance funds to invest in projects with immense impact on public health, biodiversity, resilient landscapes, sustainable livelihoods, micro and macro climate under what can be the largest climate adaptation initiative by any country in the history of the planet. American futurist Alvin Toffler famously said, and I quote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but actually those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." This could be India's learning moment that could uniquely shape and push the global shift towards the green economy.